All right, I think we're live. Assuming I set this all up correctly, it's the first time I've done this. Welcome to the Snapcraft roadmap. Ooh, I'm getting a lot of echo.
It's your you have the feed up too, so you're getting your feedback.
The what?
Just close all your tabs except this one. So we're live, and today it's just me and Kyle, myself. We have no host, so we had a bit of trouble saying on there stuff up, but we're good to go, and we can start out with a tiny, small, brief introduction. So, Kyle, what do you want to go ahead first?
All right. So first of all, what is Snapcraft? So Snapcraft is.
Oh, sorry. I want to say introduce yourself.
Sorry. I'm too focused on canceling my echo. All right. So my name is Kyle Fazzari. I'm on the Snapcraft team with Sergio and Leo, who's not here with us because he's on a low bandwidth connection. But I am particularly focused on the robotics use case for Snapcraft. So lots of what I do is on that, but I'm also involved with the nitty gritty design of it as well. So that's me in a nutshell, I guess.
Right, and I'm Sergio Svesov, and I've been in Snapcraft working on Snapcraft since October or August, maybe. I'm not really sure when that started. It became a gray area during my transition from Snappy to Snapcraft, and I've been focusing mostly on the core stuff and then plugins here and there, but I guess Kyle would be the plugin master in that sense. And yeah, as Kyle mentioned, we're here to discuss the Snapcraft roadmap, which I guess we can get started on right now. So we're gonna just go over mechanics. We're gonna start out with sort of a brief introduction of what Snapcraft is. We're gonna go over the roadmap of the core things, and then we're gonna go over with some plugins, and then what plans we have for some plugins, and then just some examples that we can get started on to broad the know-how on how to work with Snapcraft itself and get something useful and interesting for people that want to get started to work on. So Carl, do you want to give the Snapcraft introduction or should I?
You go for it.
Okay, so Snapcraft is just another, so it's the main objective of Snapcraft is to build snaps. And snaps are just apps or products or things that help you get stuff done. That's basically all it is. What their intrinsic characteristics in what snaps are, and that's why it is interesting, at least to myself. But the fact is that snaps are secure by design, if you want to play it in layman terms, and it's very easy to create something that will carry on through the length of time and it is isolated in itself and in a known state at all times. So we can basically modify so if you create something, no one can come in and modify it just because, and then get things that don't work and tracking it down and all that stuff becomes very easy. And Snapcraft is basically the tool that makes you build snaps, and it has three basic or important components or ideas or philosophies that make up what it is, and that is that every snap is built out of parts. Those parts represent a piece of code or artifact, and those parts are interpreted by plugins. So those are driven. The mechanism to get a resulting artifact out of those are through plugins, and all the plugins have a life cycle. So each plugin goes through a life cycle, which is basically pull, which pulls whatever source you need, build, which builds it. The build can just be a copy, like we have in the copy plugin. It can run make. It can do pip builds, Python setup. It can be whatever the plugin says it should be. And then we have a staging phase. And that staging phase is basically getting the resulting artifacts into this shared area where other parts can use to base their builds on. And then we have a stripped out phase, which ends up being in this snap directory in your project, which basically is potentially the resulting snap you have. And that's basically the brief introduction to Snapcraft. So that said, Snapcraft today can do a lot of things. We do write snaps ourselves, and we do write Snapcraft YAMLs, which is the project the project description of how to build that snap, which has all these parts and apps and everything I just talked about. And with the oh god, sorry. So we do have a bunch of things that work today, but we also always want to improve, and that's why we have a roadmap on where we want to get to. And that roadmap is divided in the core stuff we want to talk about, some plugins we want to extend, and then examples, of course, that I want to broaden. And with that, I'll take my time. Sorry. With that, I just want to get into what we have planned for the core. The core is basically the anything that is not plugins in what we can think about of Snapcraft. And one of the things that we have currently in Snapcraft is this concept of a wiki for parts, and these parts are things that people can define in that said wiki, and can be shared or consumed directly from the wiki using this mechanism where parts can depend on each other. So if we say part can build after another one, and there's certain semantics that allow you to just pull the part definition from the wiki. To make that, we want to expand on that idea and create sort of like a parts store. That parts store is going to be something that just from the Snapcraft CLI, you can just search for parts by name. You can get a definition of them, so you can just copy paste them from the definition to your snapcraft.yaml. And this is all going to be cacheable, so you'll be able to, it's going to be like apt-get, but for parts. You'll be able to Snapcraft update, get the cache, search it. This wiki will also allow you to have descriptions for those parts, so you can easily browse them, navigate them. And we're going to extend the concept of how these parts are defined by introducing an origins keyword. And this origin keyword will point back to an upstream project which has a snapcraft.yaml, and we'll pull from there. So then everything from the definition could be managed directly from the upstream source code. The other concept is we're going to add something similar to channels, channels that comes from snaps, which is basically something that says that the origin is not just from master in the case of GitHub, or trunk in the case of Bazaar, or whatever equivalent ECS you think of, but we can also track branches or tags or releases. So you can say the origin really comes from, I don't know, github.com/surgeon/shout, but from my beta branch. And those parts will also be able to be defined that way, and we'll automatically grab all that stuff, and you'll have, the idea is to build a rich ecosystem that so people can basically expand on that. Anything to add to the parts store, Kyle?
No, that sounds good.
Great. There's one more tiny thing that will come with this parts store, is that we will have, so yesterday people were asking about UIs, or not UIs, but graphical UIs. And we will eventually also add something that you'll be able to browse through a web browser and search parts and look for parts. And if you think that we would ever add this to Snapcraft itself, it would be sort of like can't remember which one it was, if it was aptitude or deselect, where you just searched and it showed you like description and definitions of parts and stuff like that. But there's an idea that's flowing around that. It might not come this cycle, but it is all going to be built in so that it can be built. And so if, of course, if anyone wants to hurry that up, we will accept contributions. So that's all part store. Leave that behind, and let's go on to the next thing we're thinking of, and that is, and this boils back to going back to snappy interfaces that was discussed yesterday, and the whole ecosystem of snaps. But there is, if you recall, there's a concept of interfaces, which is a way for snaps to talk to each other. And one of them, and this name for this interface is not defined yet, but there's a interface that would allow you to create some sort of, this has been mentioned in the mailing list a while. There's like library snaps in one form, runtime snaps in some other form, shared snaps in some other name. If you leave back, if you just don't get too tied up to the name of the interface, but think of the fact that once that way to create these sort of snaps comes in, we'll need to also enhance Snapcraft to be able to work with those kind of snaps. So there's interesting questions we need to solve, and this is still on the design table, but is one of the things we really, really want to get done. And it's two-phased. One is, how do I create a development kit for something that I create? So if we take, for example, ROS has this huge core that runs, and then we have these leaf snaps that would subscribe to some topics in the ROS framework. But it needs use of all the libraries from the ROS core. And there's two sides of this. One is from a consumer point of view. I want my huge ROS core, and then I want my tiny snap that I add on and just hooks up to that huge snap. That's one side of it. And then there's the other one. What if I, as a provider, want to make it easy, even a provider for myself, right? It doesn't have to be a provider for someone else. Want to just build this snap once, and then create these small snaps and hook up to this one. But this snap, to be able to hook up to this bigger snap, I'll need like the ROS core snap. I'll need header files and libraries to link to. So the idea is how to boil all that into Snapcraft and make that enjoyable experience. So those are the two sides of the story, and how we get to that is still in the drawing board, but it's something that is coming, and we do plan to get this cycle done because it's rather important, at least in the developer mindset, which is the hats we're carrying now. Then there's a slightly less interesting, so it's a very interesting topic, but it's less interesting for just a user of Snapcraft. But we do need to implement macaroon support in Snapcraft. And if you want to think of that in very, very easy terms, just think of next generation OAuth. That is going to be very butchered. Don't quote me on that, but it's basically the thing that the store is moving to, and how we want to manage identity somehow. And this is how the path we're taking. So, and after that, and once we have that, we'll be able to enhance our store publishing mechanisms. Right now, we do have Snapcraft upload support. That Snapcraft upload support will just go to the store, and then you have to go to the store UI and say, oh yeah, I want it to be on this release. Oh yeah, I want to be on this channel. Oh, but you have to register the name first. Oh yeah. So all those things, we want to make it very easy to do through the Snapcraft CLI. So you'll be able to just say, hey, I want this name. You'll get something like probably an assertion saying, hey, you own this name, so you can sign your snap with that. And that's also goes back to the assertion discussion that was mentioned yesterday in the Snappy 1604 new things. So you'll be able to just say, I want this name. I want to upload this. but I want it to be also be published to the Ubuntu Core Series 16. I want it to be published on Series 18, on both. Once rolling opens up again, I just want this to be on rolling. I want it to be on the Edge channel. I want to promote it to the beta channel, to the alpha channel, to the stable channel, and all that stuff will be boiled down into CLI, which I hope will make the experience on publishing a lot easier. Of course, the store UI will stay, and that is being improved on its own track, but we want to make it easy on ourselves as well. And I implicitly mentioned we're going to add some sort of assertion support, so you can basically assert stuff on your own snaps that make their way onto the store. That's the full list of assertion, how that's going to work is also something we need to discuss this cycle, but it will probably also be implemented. And that's basically the rough stuff, aside from all the bug fixes and minor improvements and paper cuts we plan to improve. That's the big list of core stuff we want to work on. And with that, then I'll just pass on discussing plugins to Kyle.
I was muted. All right. So currently, so let's talk about robotics here for a minute. Right now, we have a Catkin plugin that is made for ROS, and it works. So the way ROS works right now is they distribute things via their own archives. They don't use the Ubuntu archives or a PPA. And so when you set it up on your development machine, you do it using their archives. So the Catkin plugin right now uses those archives for the trusty one. Let's see. So it uses the trusty archives, and it works with the Indigo release and the Jade release, because those are the two that are in the trusty archives. That's not the most extensible way to work, especially as ROS continues developing. Whether we have to hack more archives into there. So we're hoping this cycle to move away from those archives that they have and start actually supporting building it from source using their workspace tools and ROS install generator, etc. If you guys are familiar with that, and that enables a couple of things. First of all, it allows us to move away from being tied to those archives, and so we can support more releases that way. Excuse me. But it also allows us to support architectures that ROS does not, such as ARM64, because the archives only support the architectures for which devs are published, and they don't publish ARM64, for example. So as a result, the Catkin plugin doesn't support ARM64 right now either. So that's something we're hoping to add to the Catkin plugin. Another thing we're hoping to add, something that's been requested by the industry, is support for ROS install files. So rather than maintaining a workspace on your close to your snapcraft.yaml, you can actually just specify the ROS install file to pull everything down and build it from there. Something else we're going to add support for this cycle is the new build system for ROS called Ament. That's allowing us to support ROS 2. I'm fairly new to that, so I don't really have a lot to say there, but that is something we're hoping to add here. Something else we're hoping to add as far as robotics goes is support for another a robotic platform, a meta operating system, if you will, called Moose, the Mission Oriented Operating Suite. Specifically Moose IVP, which is so Moose comes out of Oxford, Moose IVP comes out of MIT. Moose is just standard CMake, and IVP actually wraps Moose with a lot of other functionality, with sort of a custom scripted build system that requires some plugin support. So we're going to add support for that as well in this next release. And that's it as far as the robotic stuff goes. Sergio, you want to talk about the Java plugin?
Yeah, there's a bunch of, this comes into mostly paper cuts, where the Java plugins there in Snapcraft need a lot more love than and care than they have today. One of the reasons that this is left behind is sort of that I guess we don't really have that much experience in Java, but this cycle I intend to give it a lot more attention and fix all those things that we sort of left behind in Java and make it much more first-class citizen than it is. It's not that it doesn't work, it's just that it could be a lot better, and that's something we're going to work on. Um, the other thing, yeah, so going to ventricle, I have my mic on this cable here, and it was just dangling, so that's why it it went in and out, faded in and out. Sorry about that. And so it's right now with the Java plugin, you can only use Java which comes from debs, but we've been asked a lot to provide a way to use, given you have the means and rights to do so, use I was going to say Sun, the Oracle JDK and JREs to drive your snaps and or IBM's or whoever's virtual machine you want to use, and then also the Maven stuff could use some. We could improve a lot on the Maven, the use of how Maven is grabbed into the with the plugin and make allow it to make much smaller snaps than you would get today. Aside from that, there's one other thing I want to work on regarding plugins, and that is the Python plugins. I want to experiment with different ways to work with the Python plugin that make it a lot easier and much more friendlier or familiar to people that are used to virtual AMs and such. I do have a couple of proof of concepts, and I do plan. I guess we could plan to introduce those Python improvements in maybe a form of a new plugin, just so we don't break backwards for anyone that is already depending on the existing Python plugins. But that is also something to look into. And that I guess that's the whole plugin discussion, at least the bigger ones. And I'm just going to take the switch of context here and focus on these, bring up these two questions that have been asked while we were talking. One is, being standalone, won't the snap packages be much bulkier than typical package? Example, Grammata deb. Yes, that answer is yes. That's the short answer. The involved answer is maybe not. I've been packaging myself some Electron-based apps, and they're rather small when you look at the deb ones. And it is big if you compare the sum of the debs to the sum of the snaps. Even sometimes the snaps are bigger, and I think that's just because some of us are being lazy when snapping stuff up and putting stuff in the snap that really don't belong there. And most of this comes from something I personally try to avoid, but using stage packages. Stage packages have this problem that you just bring in the full deb, so you have to do manual cleanup with file filtering that we support in snaps that we can look into in the next session that's titled Workshop, Snapcraft Workshop, or How to Build Your Own Snap. We'll discuss file sets there where you can filter things that are not needed out of your snap that were just used to build or brought in by stage packages that you really don't need. And one thing we added to Snapcraft in this last cycle was the ability to, and this is a big one, to use build packages as you used to use. So build packages, so we have build packages and stage packages. Build packages install snaps on the host that you're running Snapcraft from, but stage packages make sure the whole content of the deb is in the snap. By using build packages, and the reason we stopped was because we had this package config problem where there was only one sysroot support for only one sysroot when running package config, so we missed out a bunch of dependencies that were package config dependencies that were run when you ran CMake or whatever build mechanism and failed builds. So we added support for that and the ability to check multiple sysroots, and we brought build packages back in as first-class citizens. So now you can just say, if you need to build against Qt, you just say, bring me Qt core dev as a build package, build against it, and then we have this crawling mechanism that crawls the full snap and brings in anything that you link against that is not part of the core itself. And that makes much smaller snaps and life much more easier.
Right. So to give us a more specific example, when you use a stage package, right, debs don't include just the libs that you're linking to. They include man pages. They include documentation or libs you aren't even linking to. Maybe you're only linking to one library in a deb, and it includes several more. All of those, if used as a stage package, will end up in the final snap, which could potentially waste a lot of space. So using the automatic library crawling, which isn't perfect, it still needs some work, but it does save a lot of space.
Right. So I hope that answers the question. That was a very long answer, but I hope it answers it.
And to be, I mean, you don't get anything for free, right? Yes, the snap package will be more bulky than a deb that depends on other debs, right? But you end up not having to deal with the dependency nightmare that debs can introduce. You also end up with the extra. I mean, all of the benefits of Snap, right, that you can find all over the place come from lots of them anyway, come from the fact that they are standalone and package their dependencies.
Right. Then the other question we had was, will it be possible to share pre-built tested parts so that other developers can, example, get a pre-built library release from upstream? I would say that really depends upon Snap developers and how this interface I mentioned earlier about library runtime shared snaps turns out to be. Maybe yes. And with the help of assertions, we can probably make sure nothing breaks. Yeah, and I hope the previous explanation of what we want to do in core also answers that question implicitly. So Kyle just brought another question that he spotted. Can we build an infrastructure in Snapcraft that allows people to authenticate using OAuth similar for including parts which require commercial licensing? I don't understand that question that much. I really don't.
So okay, so what I'm seeing there is, so Manik, correct me if I'm wrong, but so right now we have the wiki parts, but you're saying can we have some area where parts that aren't necessarily open source can be hosted as well, rather than just on the wiki? So as part of the parts store work, can part of that be something that has protected access, so things that require licenses can be used? And the answer to that is I have no idea, but
so if I think of the Oracle Java thing, I'd say I don't know of a way to download with something signed. All I know is that you can just go to your browser, go to the Oracle download page, and manually say I accept this license, and it'll give you a download link, which is probably dynamically generated. But if people allow this, I guess it's all about providing the right mechanisms, right? That's a bigger topic, so we can discuss that in its own forum. Maybe a mailing list.
Yeah, that sounds like a perfect topic for a mailing list.
So the other question is, will the crawling have special support for things like Qt plugins where they're not discoverable via LDD but have no locations? Okay, yeah, sorry for my terrible reading. First of all, the crawling is already implemented and is already part of Snapcraft. If you grab the latest Snapcraft on Xenial, you will be able to work with that easily already. We do not do automatic crawling for things that are DL opened in the plugin form.
Right. It's really just LDB right now. Yeah.
And we also do not bring in something that you might exec VE in these terrible libraries that I've been seeing or something like that. those things we do not do. If you want to solve those, you have two options. You can stage package those individually,
Which is what I do.
And this again, this is very, very there's many ways to do this, but you can also just add the build package and use the copy plugin, which should work. Hope that answers the question. So I can move on to the next one that says, do you plan on adding a way to manage a collection of patches that can be applied to an upstream tarball? My initial response is no. So if I think of this, we do not want to create a packaging system. We just want to a way so that people can just provide snaps. If you think of it, this whole patching system is no different than forking something and putting your patches on top and rebasing every time there's a release. It's the same thing. The whole patching mechanism comes from, personally, I think the Ubuntu archive is a huge fork of every source tree that's around and adds rebases every time with patches on top, every time there's a new upstream release. And it's the same thing. So I don't think we should do that. It would be much easier to just fork and apply things upwards and rebase every time there's a release that you want or need. Or why do you want the patch? Just propose your fixes upstream, and if they're good enough, they should get it. If they're not good enough or they're not accepted, it must be for a reason, right? And we have to dig into that and figure it out. So I think we depleted the questions. And so we can move on to the next thing in the roadmap we want to address, and that is a bit more, some more examples. So examples first are sort of like, it's twofold. It's a test bed of things we support and dive into. So it broadens our horizon on what can be done with Snapcraft ourselves as a team, and discover I don't know, paper cut bugs faster, or things we didn't know we could do, or just have a broader user-friendly experience for other people to start working on stuff. And one of the things that we have not done and probably should have during the last cycle is add .NET examples. Now that .NET Core has been open sourced, there has been some interactions about that, and we do plan to add some of those to Snapcraft itself. The other one is Swift examples. I have no idea how Swift works, but it's been requested many times, and we've been repinged on this bug and about a Swift example. If someone wants to contribute one, that would be great, but if not, we'll just get to it and do it. And then, given the focus on the Ubuntu we all know and love and we use on our laptops and desktop, we do want to create some desktop worthy examples to base on. And that's all for examples that we have. So I'll get back to questions. Kyle, do you want to take that one?
Yeah, so we're actually, so we're working like Snappy, where we plan on SRUing everything. So as we develop these new features, we do SRU them back. Now, does that apply for all of the roadmap features, Sergio?
Yes. I don't. So if it's not in Xenial, I guess it's not worth mentioning it.
Yeah, good point.
The Xenial is what. So Xenial is basically Ubuntu Core 16. So if it's not there, it will make sense to promote it. If we push the Yakety, it really won't make it could. So we're not going to block anyone from building snaps on Yakety, but it might or may not work depending on the features you want, or libc or ABI issues or whatever.
Yeah, I can say from experience, building on a newer version that you're targeting oftentimes does not work out due to libc.
In the sense that this comes in the sense that we want to behave sort of like dbuild does, where you can just run it wherever you want, and if you want to build for the target that is in Debian changelog, we'll add a target. I think it's going to be a release key into snapgraph.yaml where you say what the target release you want the target is. That way we can publish easier and make those assumptions a lot easier. And we have clean build, which basically builds in this in a container, builds the same runs the same Snapcraft process, but in a container, and allows you, of course, to do the equivalent of what sbuild did or does. So we don't guarantee it will work when you build on different releases, but unless you, of course, make it to, but we will at least make sure that you can do it and try and experiment.
Another question came in. Are you going to update the Catkin plugin? As of right now, it's hard to have the latest Snapcraft on 14.04 with Indigo. So right now, you're right. So pre-Xenial, the only version of Snapcraft that works is Snapcraft 1.x. I think it's 1.0.2 or 1. I don't know. So, however, it does have all of the right now it has the same features, the Catkin plugin in 1.0 as the Catkin plugin in 2.x. But it does mean that you can only target Vivid from there. So Snappy 15.04. It is, like you mentioned, it's pretty tough to actually get the newest Snapcraft and also that's that old, because it does have dependencies that are only in Xenial. What I suggest is, since the Snapcraft that runs on Xenial can still build with Indigo, it sounds like you have a developer set up in 14.04 with Indigo, which is obviously fine because I think that's one of the only supported releases for Indigo. Once you're ready to actually package as a snap, do it in an LXC a container or a virtual machine that's running Xenial, and it should work just fine with the workspace you have set up. I don't know that we can enable a workflow that's better than that with the fact that Snapcraft is only available in Xenial for the newest version.
There's a security question I'm not really following. It says, from the public pad, security, how are Snap packages authenticated and how is freshness handled? Would the benefit from using the update framework as Dockery Notary has done? Do you capture that question? So we'll take that to I guess, our security guys and ask them. But I think that's more of a delivery mechanism for snaps, or are you talking about tracking CVs and stuff like that from within your snap and being notified about those? If it's about that, we do have one minor. Well, it's not minor depending on how you look at it, but we do have this minor feature that we want to add to Snapcraft, which will allow you to determine or take note inside the snap of where all the sources came from. So someone or somehow a mechanism could be built that tracks the status, the security status, or the status of every other of every snap on your system. You can consider it like a Debian watch thing that just is there, and you can track like anything, because you'll just have, it's just a description of what's there, and you can do whatever you want with it.
Any more questions?
Okay, Kyle. So I guess if we're running out of questions, do you have anything to add that we might have missed?
Not really, although I did want to point out that I pasted a link to the wiki part now a while back. Maybe I could do that again, actually, in case anyone was interested. You can contribute to those, etc. Here, I'm going to paste it in there.
Okay, so there's a hidden question there asking if there's going to be documentation on about all this. So yes, that's the easy answer. If you're in a hurry to see the Snapcraft documentation, which might be taking its time to make it to the developer portals on ubuntu.com, you can actually go to the Snapcraft sources on github.com/ubuntu-core/snapcraft, and there's the docs directory in there, which you can basically read from GitHub itself. It's all marked down. We've been trying to, well, as Snapcraft developers ourselves, we've been updating the documentation as we make changes. We might have missed some things because we don't know the documentation by heart, and we certainly don't read the documentation end to end with every commit we make. So if you find anything there, feel free to create a PR. It's super easy from GitHub. You can just click on the pencil and just say, I want to fix this.
It's also important to note that we've tried to document quite a few snappy things there as well, even though this is Snapcraft. So that should be useful. However, since we aren't in the day-to-day snappy, sometimes things change without us knowing. So that gets out of date sometimes. If you notice that, please feel free to make a pull request for that as well.
So Zygmunt is asking another question about a CLI to push a build to Launchpad farm. We can look into that. That really does not involve only us. It involves the Launchpad team. And the Launchpad team already has its mechanisms to support this. There's no like...
Well, it's part of the Launchpad Python library, but I don't know that functionality belongs in Snapcraft necessarily, because you have to. It basically involves pushing up the code to Launchpad and then creating a Launchpad Snap package and building it from there, which is sort of its own workflow. It doesn't involve the life cycle at all. It involves pushing, bizarre Git branches. So I'm not sure that really fits into Snapcraft so well.
Exactly. That's what I want to say as well. So I don't see any more questions.
By the way, as far as the Launchpad building goes, that's something we're planning on covering in our next session here in an hour and 15 minutes. So stay tuned.
Right. So if you're interested in documentation, 15 minutes from now there will be a documentation session which will discuss documentation. Anyone interested in better documentation? Of course, I guess everyone is. Just feel free to join and we can discuss how to improve that documentation. There are many efforts that are going around, and that's something that we really want to get done, because it also helps us a lot not to answer the same question over and over again on IRC or mailing lists. And we also we want to make sure the documentation is all up to date, which it is not. And well, that's, I guess, what's going to be discussed for 13 minutes from now. And then there's a tiny workshop. This is going to be similar to what we've done. If you've ever participated in the Snappy clinics that were hosted on Ubuntu On Air, it's going to be pretty similar. We're just going to go and dive into a topic of Snapcraft. Initially, we just going through the basics again. So we'll discuss parts, plugins, lifecycle, how to write stuff, how to get started with a project. We'll get started with a very, so our focus is going to be desktop snaps. So snaps that have an icon and a UI. We're going to start with a simple one, get that going. That will work. Then we'll go dive in a bit more, and we'll also probably, if there's time, go into overriding or extending a plugin. That's the topic for the workshop. And with that, I guess, thank you very much for your time, and I hope to see you guys in the next sessions, or IRC or mailing lists.
All right, thanks a lot, guys. Yeah, that sounds good. All right, have a good day, guys.